If you're like me, you probably find that it's easier to learn something, to really truly understand it, if you follow along and do the actual thing yourself. Being able to watch a thing is great, but there's nothing quite like actually configuring something, actually building something out of whole cloth. Now, it is for that reason that all the demonstrations, the entirety of what you're about to see here in this learning path for the 70-411, I've tried to put together in such a way that facilitates you actually following along and building yourself. And so let's take a minute here in this second module for our intro course and just talk a bit about the prerequisites, the things you have to have laid in place if you want to follow along. Here in this module, we have three relatively quick topics to talk about, one of which is a pretty much complete copy and paste from what I presented back in the 70-410 content. Number one is exploring the different virtual machines that you'll want to have built in order to follow along. There are a relatively small number of VMs that we need to do the various demonstrations here for the 411, roughly on the order of about half a dozen. And at any point in time, probably about 3, maybe 4 need to be up and operational at any point in time. So you'll need to have a reasonably powerful machine in order to support mainly the RAM, the virtual RAM requirements for these virtual machines. I also want to talk a bit about the network infrastructure, which is slightly more complex than what we saw back in the 410. And the reason for that is everything to do with the remote access, the couple of different remote access courses that we'll be going through. For everything else, we'll have a single infrastructure, a single network that we'll be using, which is the bridged network. But for those remote access courses, we'll need to set up a couple of virtual machine networks using VMware Workstation. And in fact, it is that use of VMware Workstation, which is our third item down here, where I'm going to, as I said, kind of copy and paste that content for the 410 because it's functionally the same information. That information, you'll hear me talk about the 410 and also that the 411 includes some new and improved virtual networks to deal with. And as we get later on here in the courses specific to remote access, I'll explain more about how to configure those virtual networks to support the networks that our remote access server will need.